Hello everybody, welcome to the September 29th, 2010 radio show. My name is Peter, of course, and this is lecture number 1, even though it's not quite a lecture, I'd say it's more of a presentation, but it's going to be entitled The Zeitgeist Movement, Current Structure and Processes. Now, before I begin, some of you might have heard the Venus Project had to cancel their Canadian tour because Jacques got a terrible cold and has some issues. They are safely back in Florida now, and Jacques, I heard from Roxanne yesterday, Jacques is doing better. It's nothing super serious, so everyone that's been emailing me, don't worry, I think things are okay. But he is very weak with a very severe cold and some side effects of that cold and sinus-related stuff that I won't go into. But nevertheless, I hope everyone appreciates the tremendous will this individual has and the very fact that they've spent 3.5 months on the road going place to place to give talks to people about this direction is so tremendous that I just want to reiterate the fact that everyone needs to appreciate this substantially. I can't even imagine how exhausted they must be. I can barely get up in the morning, let alone travel around for 3.5 months. Okay. So basically what I'm going to do today for the next hour is go over everything that's been developed over the course of the past, year and a half of the development of the movement, the self-generating structure that has emerged, which is both logical and novel, and lay it out for those that are not familiar, that might be new, and of course those that are seasoned, that have been here for a while but might not be familiar with some of the new processes that we're working with and the new structures that we're working with, and also of course clarify a lot of things that get brought up consistently, usually in the form of confusion. Let's see here. Before I start though, before I forget though, there's going to be a knowledge base entry for every one of these lectures. So there's 8 lectures or talks, and there will be a knowledge base entry for every one. So later today, I'm going to have a knowledge base entry to describe the general structure and processes of the movement, and you can find that, of course, in the knowledge base. And I'll try to be as technically accurate as I can, hopefully with some graphs and everything else. And I want to apologize for the general knowledge base, a lack of culmination. I'm quite spent right now with multitasking with various things in the film, which I'm going to go through the film here in a second. But anyway, it's been a very, very difficult number of weeks, and but we're getting there, and I'm getting there at least, and I'll be very relieved once January comes along, because that's when the film will be released. In fact, let's go ahead and talk about that right now. Zeitgeist moving forward, I hope to have the trailer done and presented by the first week of October, so it's coming up very soon. The trailer will probably be in 2 forms. There'll be 2 trailers. One will be very short, shotgun gesture trailer, as you typically see cliche within the media industry. Second will be an extended trailer, a number of minutes that will go into a little bit of detail that will summarize the sections that I'm working with for the larger film. The distribution of the film and the presentation of the film. Well, what we're doing, and I want to make sure everyone understands this, is we're going to do a simultaneous release mid-January of 2011 through all the chapters in hopefully 20, 30 languages. So if I was to loosely describe this, and I'm beginning the process now, there will be 20, 30 languages, simultaneous release in 60+ countries, all around the weekend ideally, and this isn't set in stone, of January 15th. The structure of the release itself, as far as monetary, as far as theatrical, obviously this isn't just some Zeitgeist Day thing where someone can take the film and load it into their living room and invite people over. I'm making this as large as possible, and I have to be unfortunately very strict with it as well. But basically what's going to happen with this is I'm going to have contracts set up with each of the chapters, the main heads of the chapters. And they are going to take the responsibility of finding a space and financing a space to show the film if they care to do so. Simultaneously, they get everything profit-wise, so to speak. I don't like using that terminology, but whatever is acquired from these screenings will go to that chapter. This is a feeble attempt at getting some funding for the chapters in general. But I think it's relevant, and all this money will go towards promotion of that chapter. Now, this isn't a free-for-all. And I'm taking a big risk here, and I need to speak with a series of lawyers about this regarding the problems that could emerge with such an idea, because this is unprecedented. I'm essentially relying on people to bring the film out and trusting them to be responsible and honest about the tracking of the money. Now, digital purchases will probably be the norm for this, meaning that I'm going to have a programming interface that will basically track ticket sales across the world for anything that's done digitally online through credit cards and the like. And they will be represented in real time through the programming for everyone to see. To also, of course, make sure that we know who's getting what, and to make sure that those funds will eventually be allocated towards promotional work of that particular chapter. There's going to be exceptions to this, and I'm aware of this, but that's okay, and I'm putting a great deal of trust in everybody to move forward with this in a diligent, respectful way. It's again, it's risky, but there's a few different angles to this. For example, I can't personally afford to rent out theaters across the world. The few possible negotiations I have with small theaters out there that could emerge in New York and Los Angeles, for example, theater chains that might find merit with this, and instead of me having to constantly rent out, or any group having to constantly rent out something, they will actually finance it themselves, and with some type of negotiation where they keep X amount, and of course the rest goes to the chapter. That's the most ideal circumstance. But overall, the approach will be that the chapters will have to finance the rental, and then they keep what they obtain. I can't rent things out because I'm essentially broke, and it's going to be a very trying period, I think. But nevertheless, I mean, all I can hope for, to be perfectly frank with everybody, is that I can make back with the $5 DVD sales. Of course, the film will be put online for free. The film will be downloadable in torrent form, just like the other films are, for free. Everything will be there for free, so it's the same kind of donation base, where if you want the physical disc and you want to support what I'm doing, well, you can do so. The only caveat to this is that there are some film festivals that I will enter into that will restrict the ability of the film to be online for a certain period of time. And that's a little bit of a problem, but there's also a kind of a workaround with this, because it doesn't say in the rules of most of these situations, within most of these situations, that the film can't be purchased or downloaded. So that shouldn't affect the torrents. So while the film might not be viewable in a live setting, say from my Vimeo account through zeitgeistmovie.com, it will be downloadable for viewing for free. Don't hold me to that, because there could be some caveats I'm not seeing. I'm still working this out, but that is the approach. One way or another, it's still going to be there. And anyway, I'll just leave it at that. So, okay, the Zeitgeist movement, structure and processes. What comprises the Zeitgeist movement in form? Everyone out there should know what we think and what our tenets are, but what is the structure of the movement? We have in the movement basically two distinctions of people overall. There are coordinators and there are members, and there are overlapped elements between both parties. For example, I would be the global coordinator, if you will. Now you'll notice I refrain from using the word leader. The difference between coordinator or organizer or leader is, of course, purely semantic, but leader has a cultural connotation which is faulty. Leadership assumes that there's a central position of power. It assumes that someone knows everything. And if you look at the history of Western civilization, presidents and dictators and leadership, the connotation culturally becomes quite negative. So I am here to do my best to coordinate and organize tasks and keep the tenets of what we're doing in focus, while of course remaining open and emergent to new information. So I just want to make that general distinction, and I like to get the language proper so we don't have any semantic dispute. Anyone who refers to me as a leader or Jacques as a leader really has to be careful, because the cultural connotation is loaded. So coordinators and members, that's what we are. Members and coordinators are hence divided into regional chapters. As I've stated many times, the chapters are the movement. The chapters, physical chapters, are what comprise everything that we do. And if you're not in a chapter, You very much should be. Now, I understand some might have some disabled elements and they can't go to a physical chapter meeting. That's completely understandable. Chapters can operate very, very efficiently in a virtual realm as well, but naturally, in the end, a physical presence is important. The numbers and people are very, very important for a critical mass in order for us to create influence. You know, all the, I don't want to go off on this tangent, but all the attributes of traditional protests that we've gone through, we're not here to get a bunch of people together and yell at buildings in a free speech zone. The actions that the Zeitgeist movement will take in the future, once global critical mass of some level is attained, will be of extreme utility and of direct action, not angrily pontificating and benign protests that have become just so dormant and looked beyond at this stage with no press covering. The actions that the movement will work with, which will be explicitly nonviolent and in fact be within the model of, as far as I'm concerned, the American Civil Rights Movement, Martin Luther King and even Gandhi. These are, historically speaking, the most efficient means of social activism, which is essentially not participating in the games that create the oppression or create the destruction and the problems. Nothing can be stated against that. Nothing can work against groups that simply choose not to participate, and that's the model that we will eventually use. But that's for another conversation. Now, chapters, of course, have a hierarchical construction by the very nature of them. So we have the global chapter, which extends to the country chapters, which extend to state, regional, province chapters. Those three layers are pretty much all you need at this stage. Granted, you can go even farther. For example, we might have a university system where universities can create their own groups, and they can exist within the respective state or city chapter that the university exists in. Now, on the subject of chapters, we have information flow. Now, this is important because it's a question that's brought up a lot, even though I've always considered it to be self-evident. How does anyone participate in the Zeitgeist movement? Are we an open democracy where every single person who's a member will just vote on something? No, not at all. We are not a democracy in the sense of traditional democracy, because traditional democracy is based on the failure of technical resolve. In other words, the only reason anyone would ever need to vote on anything is because a technological or rational solution cannot be arrived at with the amount of information available, digested in an objective way. Now, I know that sounds like a loaded thing for a lot of people that have never heard of such a statement, and if we have some new people listening, let me briefly expand on that. Democracy is mob rule in its purest sense. Mob rule is 10 white men hanging one black man. In the case of the United States, we established this thing called the Constitution, which is an empirical balancer, if you will, semi-empirical, which says, okay, every statement here has to be respected with regard to the decisions of mob rule, whether it be mob rule of Congress or whether it be mob rule of the electorate. This Constitution is going to eventually be replaced by science and the scientific method. The only true natural constitution that can possibly exist is scientific and natural law, hence physics, hence everything that creates everything around you that you see right now, listening to me speak, viewing your computer screens, the cars that you drive, the way you get food, the way food is grown, the absolute natural processes that guide all of our lives, the fact that if you don't eat, you will die, if you don't drink water, you will die, if you don't have air to breathe, you will die. And all of the extrapolation that can be obtained presents a case for a systems awareness of the natural order of reality, which is emergent and we are discovering things about all the time. In society today, we do not focus on this at all. We are based on a folk way of operation that's so archaic and old, it boggles the mind. But I won't go on that tangent. So, back to my point. The natural constitution, if you will, of global society is science, is physical law, and we need physical reference to make all the decisions that we need. A resource-based economy is based explicitly upon resources and natural processes and not human subjective opinion, except with regard to higher-level arbitraries such as human value. Now, please note, when I say human value, I don't mean that anything anyone wants is not obtainable. This is again for another conversation which will occur later in the lecture series if that statement strikes you as obtuse. But nevertheless, arbitrary human values are human values produced by culture and not by actual need. Wants are cultural human values. Needs are direct physical necessities. So anyway,